we did not lose, the church did not lose Christendom, so to speak, by losing an argument. Right? And that's what a lot of people, when they try to want to fight the culture wars and fight for the family, a lot of times it's just in this sort of intellectual sphere. And we just kind of live as practicing Catholics, but practical atheists. Our way of life daily does not show a dependence on God, does not show a connection to the church. So we have to do it by force of will.
There's a book out called The Liturgy of the Land, Cultivating a Catholic Homestead. This book is more about the philosophy of the quality of life, of family life, and mixing that life in the agrarian lifestyle where, you know, the Catholic faith and family life sort of collide in a beautiful and harmonious way. And we're going to have a conversation with Jason Craig, who co-authored this book over at tanbooks.com.
By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
We've had this book now for a couple of weeks. I've gone through it. My son has gone through it. He's really interested in ranching, by the way. The book I found fascinating because it's more about philosophy in many ways. And it dives deep into some big questions about the quality of life. But I believe it's more about the final confrontation between good and evil over the family and making a long, hard, tough decision on how we are to raise our family and live our lives in unison and harmony with the Catholic faith. And Jason Craig joins us now to discuss that. I like the presentation of the book, the images of your family and Thomas Van Horn's family, and on the farm and in the action with the kids. I thought it was beautiful work just on the surface. What motivated you to want to write or co-write this book?
Every family at some point is going to have, it sounds like your son's having it, especially men who want to take care of their family. At some point, they're going to go, sweetie, I think we should live on a farm, right? Like that's going to occur in every man's mind. And what we propose in the book is that the reason is that that's actually our native natural habitat for the family. That's where, like, literally God makes the family thrive because that's how he designed us to live, is to live in harmony with him, with the earth, right? And then as man, we're kind of in this middle ground between heaven and earth. That's what we are, body and soul. And we were recognizing, we're sort of converts to this way of life. Both of us about 12 years ago moved to the land at the same time, different places, but at the same time. And as we did that, we faced all the challenges, the difficulties of that, and recognizing, how hard it is. But also in that time, we've seen a lot of sort of would-be homesteaders start and fail. And you brought up that it's a lot of philosophy, and that the reason it's a lot of philosophy is that there's actually ways of thinking, ways of living that we've been conditioned in, and we don't know it. And all of a sudden you're on the land and everything's different. And so we wrote the book to sort of recognize, hey, and if you notice, all the chapters are from this to that, these are the conversions you're going to have internally, like kind of spiritually. And if you really want to live, this is what it actually means. This isn't just branding yourself a homesteader on social media. This actually is going to take a radical conversion. And in some ways, then the book is kind of helping people maybe discern not to do it, or if they're going to do it, how to do it prudently. Yeah, one of the first things we hit in the book is this, well, it's romantic because romantic things are romantic. It's romantic to think about marriage in its best form, right? Our proposal, though, and this drawing on the teaching of the church and the consistent experience of man, is that the need to live close to the land, close to nature, is not about a period in time, right? So a lot of people, when we talk about homesteading, like, look, we've progressed beyond that. We're just not an agrarian society anymore, which is absurd because you still eat every day, right? So you have a relationship to the land. It's just how distant is that relationship? And our proposal is that the distance that we now have from nature, from creation, and by the way, most importantly, we're talking about homesteading, from the work of doing those things, procuring those things, making those things, growing, ending, that our distance from those things has been bad for our souls, and that it is better for our souls to be closer. So we cannot escape nature. She's going to come back for us. And our proposal is actually more beginning in natural law, or our sort of natural theology, that the reason we all want to go back to the land, quote unquote, is not that we want to go back in time we just want to go back to literally like our roots. I mean, so again, we all have a relationship to the land. We're just proposing that a lot more of us need to be closer to it, specifically the productivity of the land and the household, that it's good for us to be part of those things as a family, and that the family has suffered by not being a productive economic unit within itself. And the family suffers when it just consumes together and doesn't grow, make, build, tend together. So our comparison of things through the book is between like natural and artificial. And we're not saying artificial being all bad, right? A painting is artificial. You know, anything made by man directly is artificial. I mean, artifact, it's from man. But right now, all of us are, and that's why we actually took suburbanism, the suburban life, as sort of the contrary on the other side of the homesteading life. And the most the predominant characteristic of the suburban life is that it is a consuming life. You leave to go do the things that are necessary. You leave the home, that is, to do the things that are necessary. That includes social productivity, meaning making money, even very often exercise. You know, you leave the home to do these essential and good things, and then you come home, and the home itself is not a productive unit at all. It's just a consuming unit. So and this is not necessarily a critique. It's just this is literally what a suburb is. I mean, that is how it came to be. And in the book, we also show that the suburb is also not a natural outcome of free market economics. It was a very intentional forming of the American family from a predominantly agrarian, land-based country. I mean, that's who we were. That's how we settled, quote unquote, this land, by being on the land, being farmers. I mean, the whole Jeffersonian ideal. But the suburbanization of America was an intentional act. And I think the intention, and we trace the scholarship of Alan Carlson in this. It's very helpful to see, this didn't just happen by, freedom. Obviously, in the suburb, there's reasons people are there, right? It's not a concentration camp. I mean, people freely, not free, there's a lot of mortgages there, but they freely go to the suburbs because it seems like a very good place to go with your family. But if we look at the research, and we look at our own experiences, there's a lot of things that have been made more difficult by the suburbanization of America. Working with your family, even our social lives are very different. Our separation from multi-generational households, our displacement, where we can, honestly, you can pick someone up in a suburb from, Houston, Texas, and put them in somewhere in Virginia or in Nebraska, and they're gonna look about the same. I mean, they're literally gonna have the same restaurants. So we've sort of displaced people, homogenized the whole thing, and sort of industrialized home life, if you will. And the result has been, which we show in the book, has been not very good for the formation of good, strong men, for the formation of character, and especially for the coherence of the family, that the suburbanization of America has led to many more divorces, because essentially our policy is more houses, not more households, right? So this country does not benefit from intact households and multi-generational households building it. That's less taxable, that's less homes, that's less mortgages, that's less insurance. There's really nothing good for our economy in a multi-generational productive household, right? So like the farmhouse. So that's why we take the homestead, not trying to condemn the suburb, but just recognizing, the trade-offs. And the homestead has trade-offs too. I mean, if you're not willing to do some of these things, then it's just good to know that about yourself. Or if you're not capable of doing these things, or if your economic reality and your debt doesn't make it possible, then it's probably good to just, maybe I just need a tomato on the back porch, which is at the end of the book. We do try to give we kind of give these 4 quadrants that you're probably going to fall in. Like if you really want to have a relationship to land, a stronger one, the likelihood of you going like full-time homesteader or farmer is very unlikely. But hey, here's some like reasonable ways that you could move towards this and be more attuned with, the liturgy of the land. Obviously, everything I just said about artificiality, what most people are actually running towards when they're running to the homestead is the opposite of the artificial. It's the real. And the suburb actually makes it possible for us to live isolated, right? When the people you live around, including your family, when your only bonds are because you have the similar social economic reality, it's actually really hard to have community life, which is why loneliness is reported more right, in the suburb than out in the country. So no, I'm running towards God, towards family, and towards my community. I'm with people all the time. A lot of people who want to go to the homestead, particularly the father, he wants to go to work with his family. He's tired of leaving every day to bring home money to be spent by his family. He wants to actually do, this is the natural and traditional way that a father forms his children, is by working together. Like when Jesus says, I must be about my Father's business. This is what we do. And part of the reason we wrote the book, however, is that actually I would say, I have no judgment here, but if you're going to buy 100 acres and have all those operations going and then leave all day, then that might not have been discerned very well on what a prudent way to get to the land. So, but as far as the kids, Pope Pius XII said the farm produces altogether different men. And I think a lot of us that are on the farm, or on a homestead, we want the kind of men that are produced, in that space. When we move, and this is in the book, but when we moved to the land, our children were young enough that now their predominant culture is they have a relationship with their community, with the land, and with the very acts of farming, and sort of we have this way of life. So, we're going to be milking the cows here in just a minute. We're running late because the boys were turkey hunting and my daughter will be in the garden. So this is our way of life. So things like exercise, community, social life, they can happen. I mean, obviously, it's not as if we were all sitting around twiddling our thumbs until, somebody invented the shopping mall. We do have a culture formed by what we do, right? If your kids, however, they're 16, 17, 14, and they're very attached to suburban amenities, and that's their way of life they've been formed in, you actually might cause some great resentment. If you just try to rip them out and then, and then you go to work and essentially keep living the same life you had before, leaving home to go to work, but then they're just stuck at home taking care of all the pigs you purchased. That might not be a good plan. So a big part of the book is actually discerning, where is your whole family in this? Where's the buy-in from the whole family? And this isn't to say that there aren't people who aren't capable of making a radical move. It's just recognizing if you've been, if you're 20 years into your family life and culture, and then you think you're going to move 2 hours outside of town, then you're just driving a long way to soccer practice if you think you're going to continue the same way of life. That isn't we're actually not proposing everyone move out of the suburban city. We're not proposing, that might not be economically or culturally feasible for you. What we are proposing, though, is that many more people ought to live closer to the land for the sake of God, their family, and even this country. And there are ways you can do that now. The other thing is to make sure that your homestead the point of the homestead is that the family integrates. So our workouts, our food, our production, we're trying to bring those things into an integration. So the suburb, then all the things you just listed, the job of the father and the parents at that point is to hold the family together, right? Because everything we do, we leave home to do it. Right. And it's just like we're just balancing calendars and it's just kind of endless freedom of choices. Like, are we going to do this? Are we going to do this youth group? Are we going to do that? Are we going to do this sport? And your job is to bring balance to those things. Right. And that's the job of the father. But it also has a centrifugal force against the family. We feel those things. They pull, the better we are at something that's kind of suburban, the more it pulls us. So if you're a star athlete, if you want to be a really good athlete, you're not going to live much at home. You're going to live in the weight room. You're going to live at the gym. Whereas the difference of the homestead is it has a centripetal force, meaning it pulls us inward. That work and the way of life forces us together. So there's a lot of, social, psychological, emotional, relational issues with that. Are you guys ready to be pulled back together to do that work? Or were you better off keeping things in balance and making sure you eat your meals together and go to mass and pray together? Or are you at a point in life where your family could unplug and live a little more radical? And where you fit on that spectrum, we hope in the book we give you kind of where maybe you should focus and maybe not romanticize everything. Because I think the reason, again, I said at the beginning of the show, we wrote this because a lot of people fail at doing this. And I think it's easy to get enthusiastic about buying a farm and going out, and that's easy, but it's hard to do the hard work of discerning of what should we really do. So we put heavy emphasis on what you should actually be doing. We live in an age, and we should just acknowledge, we live in an age of amazing abundance. We just have what we need and what we want kind of when we want it. You want a tomato in January, you can have a tomato in January. The liturgy of the land, though, doesn't work that way. And the trade-off of our comfort and abundance has been, and we have research in the book. I mean, books like Mary Eberstadt, How the West Really Lost God. Like, the church did not lose Christendom, so to speak, by losing an argument. Right? And that's what a lot of people, when they try to want to fight what they call the culture wars and fight for the family, a lot of times it's just in this sort of intellectual sphere. And we just kind of live as we're like practicing Catholics, but practical atheists. Our way of life daily does not show a dependence on God, does not show a connection to the church. So we have to do it by force of will. The liturgy of the land, meaning living close to God and close to the liturgy of the church, draws us in sort of by necessity and by nature. It just doesn't matter. The fast is now. For example, Lent beautifully corresponds to a time when your storehouse is starting to run low on the farm. The crops haven't started growing. Even the early lettuces aren't really growing yet. It's actually the hunger months, they call them, correspond. And you might know all the traditions of like Pascha cheese and things, especially in the Eastern churches, and eggs, right? And Easter eggs. Well, that's actually because the grass is growing and the milk is healthier and there's more milk now, and the cows are calving and the eggs are coming back because the chickens haven't been laying anything, or the ducks. And so these things just go together. And you mentioned the village. I mean, part of the trade-off of our comfort is that we don't need one another. And a lot of people think they think of the village as a commune. They think of the village as a branded suburb, right? The Catholic village was not a suburb. It was very different from a suburb, because everyone who was there, they're not there because they made a decision or they could afford to live there. They were there because they needed one another. And that need brought them close to one another. The way a family, when it needs each other, they come closer together when you have need. And a village was essentially people filling the needs of their fellow villagers under the nose and the eye and on the arms of the church, and sanctifying those things. So just like our family on the homestead, we learn to need each other more by having to grow the food together, and we share the work. That's really the kernel of where we can refound and have villages again, will be when we need each other again as sort of a broader family under the eye of the church.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.